They came for my animals like they were hunting disease, not life. But what they didn't know was that this land wasn't just a ranch, it was a fuse, and they just lit it. It started with screaming, not mine, hers. Kill all the diseased animals on this land. Who permitted you to raise them? That shrill, entitled screech tore across the morning air like a bullet through glass. Margaret Blackwood, the woman who called herself HOA president but strutted like she owned the world. And behind her, 5 armed hunters, rifles slung, boots heavy, eyes cold. They didn't knock, they didn't ask. They marched right into my family's 150-year-old ranch like it was a condemned building. Like I wasn't standing there, like I didn't matter. And maybe, in their minds, I didn't. But there was one thing Margaret Blackwood didn't know. As she waved her fake enforcement orders like a queen commanding execution, something watched her, hidden just beneath this quiet soil. 50 federal eyes, waiting, listening. And when it finally started, the hunt wouldn't be for my chickens. It would be for her. You ever wake up to a Tuesday that starts like every other, and ends like a war zone? That morning, I was doing what I always did, scattering feed for my Rhode Island Reds. The same heritage breed my grandfather raised. He'd passed this land to me when he died last year, 40 acres of stubborn, weathered ground that had never bowed to time. 5 generations had called this ranch home, and now, somehow, it was mine. Me, a remote software engineer who debugged more code than fences. I didn't grow up in boots, I grew up in server rooms, but here I was feeding chickens in one hand, checking GitHub commits on my phone with the other. Life had gotten interesting. It was 7:03 a.m. when I heard it. Tires, gravel, 3 black SUVs moving slow up my driveway like some corporate convoy. For a second, I thought maybe tourists. Highland Estates had popped up 5 years ago like a luxury weed around my ranch's borders. A gated community with glass homes and fake smiles, where HOA rules were gospel and farm life was an eyesore. But then she stepped out. Margaret Blackwood, a white blazer so clean it looked sterile, heels clicking across my muddy yard like they were walking a courthouse floor. She didn't pause to introduce herself. She didn't look curious. She looked ready for war. "Mr. Morrison, I presume," she said, not asked. Her tone had that practiced bite, like every word had been sanded down in boardroom meetings and PTA campaigns. "I'm here to inform you that your little farming operation ends today." She shoved a manila folder into my chest, hard. "Official enforcement orders," she called them. "Health violations, community standards, you're lowering property values and threatening neighborhood safety." I flipped through the pages. Looked legit until you looked closer. The seal wasn't from any court I'd ever seen. Some private arbitration company, no legal standing, no jurisdiction. "Ma'am," I said, voice steady, "this ranch predates your neighborhood by about 145 years. Your HOA has no authority here." Her smile froze the air. "Oh, Mr. Morrison, you really don't understand the gravity of your situation." She gestured and the 5 hunters stepped forward, orange vests, rifles, hard eyes that didn't flinch. "These men," she announced, "are licensed wildlife management specialists. They're here to remove the diseased animals threatening our community." One stepped closer, thick-set, leathered face, and something darker in his eyes. "Nothing personal, son," he said, "but we've got orders." Then I saw it. A body cam, subtly angled, and just out of frame of my barn-mounted security camera. This wasn't random. They knew where my surveillance was. They were trying to control the narrative. I pulled out my phone, hit record. "You're not shooting anything on my land without permits and legal authority. Show me your credentials, right now." Margaret's smile faltered, just for a second. Her eyes twitched toward the old garage behind me. Not casually, not curious. Like she knew exactly what was inside. That was the first moment I felt the chill crawl up my spine. "Mr. Morrison," she snapped, "this property has been flagged by multiple departments. We have important investors interested in development, and your rustic setup is interfering with progress." She waved dismissively at my chickens. My garden, my barn. My life. Then she pulled a business card, slid it into my palm like a contract with the devil. "You have 48 hours to contact our legal team. After that, we move forward with more aggressive measures." As they turned back to their convoy, I caught something, a glimpse inside her handbag. A map. Not a Google printout. A hand-drawn map. With notations, measurements, paths through parts of my land I hadn't even walked myself. Buildings hidden from the road. Storage sheds even I didn't recognize. How did she know more about my land than I did? I didn't sleep that night. I tried. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw her staring at the garage like she'd already been inside. Like she'd lived here longer than me. Like she wasn't just after farmland. She was after something buried. The next morning, I went looking. Not outside, inside. To the attic where my grandfather's dusty filing cabinet sat untouched, I found tax records, invoices, feed bills older than I was. Then something else. A sealed manila envelope. Federal Service records, confidential. My hands were shaking. Inside, documents, badges, letters, seals I'd only seen on TV. Harold Morrison, my grandfather, wasn't just a farmer. He was FBI. He'd spent 23 years in witness protection operations, specialized in safe house maintenance. The ranch. It wasn't just a ranch. It was Site 7. That's what they called it in the letters. Site 7, Active Protection Facility. A backup federal site for witness relocation. Asset protection. Evidence retention. Suddenly, it all made sense. The reinforced foundations, the unusually secure garage, the way my grandfather always changed the subject when I asked what was stored out near the back field. He hadn't been secretive because he was stubborn. He was hiding something. Or protecting it. And Margaret, or whoever she was, wanted it. I needed help. One name came to mind. Emma Rodriguez. Old friend, local attorney, smart, sharp, and fearless. She came that afternoon, boots in the mud and legal pad in hand. "Jake," she said, "you look like someone just told you your barn's a spaceship." "It might as well be," I muttered. I showed her everything. She didn't blink, didn't flinch. Just flipped through the documents, mouth tightening as the story unfolded. "Jake, this isn't just a ranch," she said. "It's a federal asset, and you're sitting on the kind of operational site most agents don't even get clearance to know about." We found more. Maps, underground blueprints. A list of cleared personnel. And one name scratched out. M. Grant, access revoked. Margaret Blackwood wasn't real. Her real name was Melissa Grant. And she'd been here before. Now she was back. And she wasn't leaving empty-handed. She had a map of my ranch before she ever stepped foot on it. But it wasn't the map that scared me. It was what she was looking for. There's a certain kind of silence that hits right before everything breaks. It's not peaceful, it's loaded. Like the air is holding its breath. That's what it felt like the moment Emma pointed to the name scratched off the federal clearance list. M. Grant, access permanently revoked. Margaret Blackwood wasn't just some entitled HOA president trying to clean up the view. She had history with this place. And whatever had gotten her banned from it hadn't stopped her from coming back. Emma dug deeper. She always did. Her brain worked like a scalpel, sharp, precise, looking for the connective tissue beneath everything. She started with Highland Estates. "What do you know about your neighbors?" she asked. I shrugged. "Not much, they wave, they don't visit, we live in different worlds." Emma's fingers flew across her laptop keyboard. "Let me guess, Highland Estates popped up exactly 5 years ago, right?" "Right." She turned the screen to me. It wasn't just a neighborhood. It was a strategy. Margaret, or Melissa Grant, as her revoked access file said, had moved here under a shell identity, bought 3 properties, quietly replaced HOA board members with people she controlled. Within 6 months, she ran the entire HOA like a private army. This wasn't spontaneous. It was surgical. And it had one target. The mate. She didn't just land here by accident, Emma said. She came for this ranch, from the start. And that's when everything clicked. She hadn't brought hunters that day. She'd brought cover. Men who knew exactly where my security cameras were. Men who wore body cams not for evidence, but to control it. They weren't trying to remove livestock. They were trying to trigger a response. Force me to act. Force me to lose control. Give them cause to escalate. And in the chaos, get to whatever she believed was hidden in this land. Except Margaret underestimated one thing. My grandfather hadn't just built barns and chicken coops. He built traps. When Emma and I opened the garage that Margaret had kept eyeing, we found it. A digital lock. No keyhole, no handle. Just a small keypad with dust-worn edges. I stared at it for a long time. Then tried something simple. 41,534, my grandfather's birthday. A soft beep. And the door clicked open. What lay inside didn't look like anything I'd ever associated with farm life. Concrete walls. Reinforced ceiling. A safe embedded into stone, military grade, unmarked, almost invisible unless you knew where to look. Emma stood silent, for once. She reached out, brushed her fingers across the steel edge of the safe. "Jake, this isn't just a storage unit. This is secure containment." I punched in the same birthday. It worked. Inside, documents. Stamped, sealed, and terrifying. Blueprints for underground bunkers. Lists of high-value witness transfer routes. Operational memos from the FBI. And at the very bottom, a card. Plain white, with the federal seal embossed into it. Special Agent Sarah Chen. On the back, written in my grandfather's handwriting. "For Jake, when the time comes, trust no one else." We stared at it in silence. Then the phone in my hand rang. Unknown number, DC area code. I answered. "Mr. Morrison," the voice said, calm, controlled, official. "This is Special Agent Sarah Chen. We've been waiting for your call." That moment changed everything. There was no more guessing. No more wondering if this was real. The FBI knew. And they were involved. "I think there's been a mistake," I began. "I just found." "There's no mistake," she said softly. "Your grandfather briefed us on everything. I'm 30 minutes from your location. Please remain on the property. And whatever you do, don't let anyone else near that garage." The line went dead. I looked at Emma. She already knew. The game had changed. Agent Sarah Chen arrived 34 minutes later. Unmarked black sedan, government-issued efficiency. She stepped out in a gray suit, her movements precise, like someone who didn't waste energy unless it mattered. Her eyes scanned everything: the house, the barn, the garage, the tree line. Not just looking, calculating. "Mr. Morrison, Miss Rodriguez," she said, flashing her credentials with the kind of practiced motion that meant she'd done this 1,000 times. "Thank you for waiting. I believe you've found Site 7. We took her to the garage." Inside, she moved with reverence, almost like she was walking through a church. But this wasn't a place of worship. It was a vault of secrets. "Your grandfather," she said, opening her folder, "was one of our most trusted field operatives. He ran this site for over 2 decades. It served as a deep-cover safe house for witnesses, federal assets, and other sensitive materials." "What kind of materials?" I asked. She met my eyes. "Everything the Bureau couldn't risk losing." She pulled out photos. Ones I'd never seen. The same barn I fed chickens in, hiding trapdoors. The old water tower, rigged with long-range surveillance. There was even a bunker entrance beneath the tool shed I'd used to store rakes and empty feed sacks. But then she showed us something else. A face. Margaret Blackwood, real name Melissa Grant. Wanted in 3 states: money laundering, fraud, racketeering. But one crime stood out. Murders. "She's been after something your grandfather protected," Chen said, "and we believe she thinks it's still here." I couldn't breathe. "What is it?" She hesitated. Then finally said it. $50 million in recovered criminal assets. Cash, documents, evidence, too sensitive to house in federal facilities. The ranch hadn't just protected people. It had protected the one thing every criminal feared. A proof. Agent Chen closed the file. "We've been tracking Melissa for 3 years. She's methodical, dangerous, and now that she knows you're aware, she'll escalate." "What do you want from me?" I asked. She didn't smile, didn't blink. "We want to use you as bait." Emma stepped forward. "Excuse me." Chen stayed calm. "She's coming, you know it, we know it. But if we control the timing, we control the outcome." I looked around at everything my grandfather had built. The barn, the fields, the garage. And beneath it all, a war no one ever saw. Then I looked at Emma. "Do I have a choice?" "You do," Chen said, "but if you don't help us, someone else will get hurt. Maybe next time it's not just chickens and gardens she targets." I made my choice. "Tell me what you need." But Melissa didn't wait. The very next morning, at exactly 6:00 a.m., I was woken not by birds, but by sirens. Police cruisers, county health trucks, animal control vans, even a local news station's satellite van, all parked in my driveway. It wasn't a visit. It was an ambush. Margaret stood in the center of it all like a general on parade. Power suit, clipboard, cameras rolling. "Mr. Morrison," a man in a health inspector jacket said, "we've received multiple complaints about unsanitary conditions on your property. This inspection is mandatory." I demanded warrants. They waved paperwork that looked real enough to fool a judge. They didn't want inspection. They wanted chaos. And they got it. Reporters shoved microphones in my face. Animal control agents moved toward my chicken coop. Inspectors headed straight to water sources they shouldn't even know existed. It was a show. A choreographed circus meant to distract me and hide whatever real move Melissa was making behind the scenes. But then, a familiar car pulled into my driveway. Emma! She stepped out like a storm, clipboard in hand, fire in her eyes. I'm legal counsel for Mr. Morrison, she snapped, and unless you can show proper cause, this inspection is over. Suddenly, the inspector stammered. Margaret smiled less confidently. And that's when Emma dropped the hammer. All these complaints, she said, waving the file Margaret handed her, were submitted within a 2-hour window. Yesterday. From IP addresses that trace back to a single location, a server registered to Blackwood Development Solutions. The crowd began to murmur. And behind the chaos, near the garage, I saw it. A man. Wearing a county jacket. Glancing toward the side wall. Where the hidden entrance was. That's when I knew. This wasn't about violations. This was cover for a breach. And we were already 2 steps behind. There's a moment when a lie unravels, not all at once, but like thread pulled from the corner of a curtain. At first, it looks harmless, just a loose end. But keep tugging, and soon the entire illusion falls. Margaret's illusion was unraveling fast. Her media ambush was supposed to end with me humiliated, my animals confiscated, and the cameras capturing my surrender. But instead, the crowd was shifting. People were whispering. Inspectors were hesitating. And Margaret, for the first time, looked unsure. But then it got stranger. A rusted Honda Accord pulled up at the edge of the chaos, totally out of place among news vans, county cruisers, and government trucks. A young man stepped out, mid to late 20s, jeans, and a college sweatshirt, his hands shaking like he wasn't sure he belonged. And then he said it, loud enough for every mic and every camera to hear. Hello, Mother, or should I call you Margaret now? The entire yard froze. Margaret turned. And everything about her changed. The Ice Queen cracked, her power stance collapsed, the carefully crafted persona slipped right off her face. David, she whispered, what are you doing here? Cameras swung around, reporters leaned in. You told me to never come looking, the young man said, voice trembling. You told me you were dead, that you disappeared to protect me. Then he pulled out a manila envelope. I changed my mind when I found out what you were really doing. Photos, documents, evidence. You've been destroying people's lives for money, again. Margaret No, Melissa Grant staggered. Emotion finally hit her, fear, shame, rage, grief, all fighting for space in a single broken expression. Please not here, she begged. David, you don't understand. I understand you faked your death to run from the FBI, he cut in. That you murdered my stepfather, that you built an empire on blood money and lies. The crowd recoiled, even the inspectors took a step back. This wasn't a code violation anymore. It was a reckoning. Emma leaned over to me. Jake, are you seeing what I'm seeing? I nodded, a setup unraveling in real time. But something felt off. David's timing was too perfect, his entrance too cinematic. And then I saw her. Down the road, half hidden behind a parked car, watching everything with quiet intensity. Agent Sarah Chen. I understood in a flash. David wasn't just some long-lost son seeking truth. He was FBI. Undercover, embedded, and now triggering the trap. Melissa Grant, he said, no longer calling her mother. You're not just an HOA president, you're a fugitive. And this ranch, it contains the one thing that could put you away forever. The crowd gasped, Margaret stumbled. But I couldn't focus on her anymore. Because Emma had just pulled me aside. Jake, the garage. I turned. And what I saw made my blood run cold. The man in the county jacket, The one I'd seen loitering near the garage earlier was gone. The side wall access panel was cracked open, and the keypad next to it blinked red. Someone had breached the bunker. Emma and I ran. Agent Chen moved in at the same time, sprinting from the roadside with her badge already drawn. Inside the garage, the bunker door was open. Alarms blared through hidden speakers. The smell of ozone and steel hit hard. And the air felt wrong, empty. The vault was open. But the cash, the files, gone. This is impossible, Chen muttered. It was secure, surveillance showed no breach. Emma was scanning the walls. Unless they disabled the system first. No, Chen said. We would have known. Our feeds are independent of local power. That's when we heard the voice outside the barn, cold, triumphant. Melissa! Did you think I didn't know about your little FBI boyfriend, David? She shouted, voice echoing like poison on the wind. Did you really think I wouldn't figure it out? Everyone turned. She was standing calmly at the edge of the driveway, hands behind her back, surrounded by the crowd that had once trusted her. I've known for 2 years. I fed him just enough to get what I wanted. You never had control. You never had the money. Agent Chen stepped forward, calm but deadly. Melissa Grant, you're under federal arrest. Melissa laughed. Oh, sweet Sarah, you're not even close. And then we heard it. Engines. Not cars. Trucks military grade, moving fast. From every direction. Dark vehicles with blacked-out windows, heavy frames, and no plates. They tore through my fields, grinding up gravel like tank treads. Doors flung open and men poured out. Not hunters. Not inspectors. Mercenaries. Guns drawn, tactical gear, moving like trained professionals. David grabbed his mic and shouted into it. Now, execute Operation Morrison Ranch. All teams move. And suddenly, my ranch erupted. Men burst from the barn, not intruders, but federal agents, weapons ready. The coop split open, not chickens, but a hidden surveillance station. The shed cracked open, to reveal a mobile command unit. They rose from behind hay bales, from ditches, from trees. 50 FBI agents. In full tactical gear. Deployed, ready, waiting. Melissa's crew froze. They walked straight into the jaws of a trap. You think I didn't know, she screamed. You think this is over. But it was already done. David's voice was ice. The money was moved 6 months ago, Melissa. You got nothing, and we got everything. Her mercenaries hesitated, surrounded, outgunned, outmaneuvered. The neighbors backed away. Dorothy Walsh stood with a group of residents, blocking the nearest escape road with their cars. Maria Santos was coordinating traffic flow for emergency vehicles. Teenagers were directing people to safety. My community, once silent, was now standing tall. You underestimated us, I said, stepping forward. All of us. And for the first time, Melissa Grant looked scared. Agent Chen gave the final order. Move in. Federal agents swarmed. Guns lowered, suspects cuffed, vehicles impounded, evidence secured. Melissa tried to run, but Dorothy Walsh stepped in front of her with a look that could stop time. You're not stealing our peace, lady. Not today. Melissa crumbled. And as the cuffs locked around her wrists, as news cameras recorded every second, and as neighbors applauded the takedown, the story changed. It wasn't about a ranch anymore. It was about us. About people refusing to be intimidated. About a legacy that couldn't be bought, bullied, or erased. 3 hours later, after agents secured the property, After Melissa and her crew were escorted out in unmarked vans, after the last of the dust settled, Agent Chen met me at the porch. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded. "I will be." She handed me a folder. "Thought you'd want to see what you were protecting." Inside, photos, documents, maps. Hundreds of pages. "This is the evidence your grandfather hid," she said. "The real treasure." It wasn't just money. It was proof against drug traffickers, corrupt politicians, laundering networks across 3 continents. My ranch had been a silent fortress for justice. Melissa wasn't after land, Chen continued. She was after leverage, evidence that could destroy her empire if it fell into the right hands. Emma stepped out beside me. We watched the agents pack up the last of their gear. "You were the last wall," she whispered. And I realized something. I hadn't inherited a farm. I'd inherited a mission. Most people think a storm ends when the thunder stops, but that's not true. The worst part comes after, when you realize how much was washed away, and what it uncovered. 3 weeks after the takedown, the ranch was quiet again, but it didn't feel like peace. It felt like a pause before something bigger. The media had swarmed, headlines, interviews, feature segments on the ranch that took down a crime queen. Everyone wanted a sound bite, a quote, a hero. But I wasn't interested in being anyone's headline. I still had chickens to feed, fields to check. And questions, too many, that wouldn't leave me alone. Because the last words Melissa Grant shouted as the FBI dragged her off still echoed in my mind. "This is just the beginning. You have no idea how deep this goes." Agent Sarah Chen came back to the ranch 3 times in the following weeks, not for operations, for conversations. Every time she sat in the same chair on my front porch, sipped black coffee out of one of my grandfather's old mugs, and unfolded pieces of a puzzle so massive, it made everything we just survived feel like the first page of a 1,000-chapter novel. Melissa Grant, she told me, was just one face, one operative, but the network, it's national, international. Over 200 fake residential communities across the U.S. alone, all part of a real estate laundering pipeline built to scrub criminal money clean. Highland Estates had been one node in that system. The HOA, a cover. The bylaws, tools for forced evictions and land grabs. The entire neighborhood, constructed using dirty money from drug cartels, human trafficking rings, and shell corporations that spanned 3 continents. And the worst part. The residents were innocent. Families, veterans, teachers, people who just wanted a safe place to live, people who had unknowingly bought homes inside a criminal operation designed to use them. They were pawns, Agent Chen said, her voice low. Collateral. Melissa's network funneled over $500 million through developments like this, but yours was different. Because Morrison Ranch wasn't a pawn. It was a threat. My grandfather had spent years protecting evidence, not just of crimes, but of the very system Melissa belonged to. And the FBI, they'd let that illusion live as long as it gave them a chance to go deeper. That's why they waited. That's why the bunker was left accessible, why the team stayed hidden. They weren't just after Melissa. They were after everything. And they got it. David, or Agent David Rodriguez, as we now knew him, had played the long game. For 2 years, he'd lived inside Melissa's world, pretending to be the son she abandoned, studying her psychology, feeding her false intel, guiding her toward the trap she never saw coming. When I asked him how he did it, he didn't give me the answer I expected. She believed I was her second chance, he said. She wanted me to forgive her, she needed it, so she opened up, let me in. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. But what he got in return was gold. Paper trails, transaction logs, offshore accounts, private messages. Enough to build a case that would ripple through law enforcement agencies, from D.C. to Geneva. Arrests began the week after Melissa's fall. 12 states, 17 operations. Over $300 million in recovered assets. And it all started here. With a chicken farmer who inherited a fortress. But the biggest shift didn't happen in federal courtrooms. It happened in my neighborhood. Highland Estates, the same place that once tried to destroy me, was changing. The residents, once distant and divided by manicured lawns and HOA rules, were now showing up, working together, rebuilding what had been broken. And leading them was Dorothy Walsh. Elected HOA president with 95% of the vote, she ran unopposed. The woman who had once waved politely from the sidewalk was now coordinating neighborhood watch programs, setting up community forums, and even proposing something radical. A name change. "We shouldn't carry the name they gave us," she said during a meeting held on my front lawn. "This place has a new story now, a real one, and it starts with the people who protected us." That's how Highland Estates became Morrison Community. The vote was unanimous. They didn't just honor my family, they reclaimed the narrative. This wasn't a place built by developers. It was now a place built by survivors. Maria Santos started a community garden initiative. Her son, who used to help me mend fences in exchange for eggs, became the unofficial ambassador between the new HOA and my ranch. He organized youth programs teaching local kids about farming, sustainability, and most importantly, resilience. Emma and I, we kept working together, first on legal cleanup, then on rebuilding systems for accountability and transparency. Somewhere in the middle of the court filings, property audits, and FBI interviews, something shifted. We'd always been close, old friends, college confidants, but now there was something deeper, earned, grown. She opened a legal clinic in the new Morrison Community Center. Free consultations, real help, the kind of support working families rarely get. And together, we turned part of the ranch into a hybrid education facility. Farming above, history below. The underground bunkers, once hidden from the world, were transformed, not into museums of fear but classrooms of truth, exhibits on federal safe houses, archives on financial fraud, interactive programs on recognizing manipulation in communities. We weren't hiding anymore. We were teaching others how to fight back. And as the story gained national attention, something else happened I never expected. People started asking for help. Emails, letters, phone calls. From other neighborhoods, other states. People who'd seen signs, gut feelings, small things that felt off but they didn't know how to fight it. Now they did. Morrison Ranch wasn't just a story. It had become a beacon. The FBI launched a joint task force, using our case as the operational blueprint. Agent Chen was promoted to national coordinator. David led a new undercover division, specializing in organized real estate crime. They still check in sometimes, quiet calls, cryptic updates. But every now and then, they send flowers. The card always reads the same. Your grandfather would be proud. And maybe that's what hits me most. Because when I sit on the porch at sunrise, with my laptop open, chickens pecking nearby, and dew rising off the grass, I realize something that's hard to explain to people who weren't here. This place was never just land. It was a stand. A stand against corruption, against intimidation, against the idea that powerful people could take whatever they wanted without consequence. And when you draw that line, when you say no, you don't just protect your own life. You protect something bigger. You protect everyone watching. Because the truth is, Most people don't fight back because they don't believe anyone will stand with them. But when someone does, it changes everything. That's what my grandfather understood. And now, so do I. Some truths aren't buried. They're locked, hidden behind steel, codes, and time, not because they're dangerous, but because they change everything once they're seen. I thought the story was over. Melissa was gone, her empire collapsing, the FBI satisfied, the neighbors rebuilding. But something didn't feel finished. It didn't feel settled. There was still one place we hadn't touched. One door, deep inside the bunker, that had never been opened. Agent Chen called it Level 3. My grandfather called it something else in the files I found. Final contingency. It was sealed tighter than anything else on the property. No digital keypad, no biometric scanner, just a mechanical vault with a single line etched in tiny lettering on the steel. Do not open unless you're prepared to carry it. We were not yet. But that day was coming. The bunker conversion project had already begun, transforming the safe house into an educational archive. Volunteers from the neighborhood helped clear out rooms, paint walls, organize documents. Maria's son led high school students on tour about law enforcement history. Emma helped develop programming on community legal rights. But Level 3. It stayed off limits, even to us. Until a letter came, not an email, not a call. A letter handwritten in a sealed envelope, delivered by hand through Agent Chen herself. It was addressed to me. Jake Morrison, confidential, read alone. The handwriting, I recognized it immediately. It was my grandfather. Inside was a single page. If you're reading this, then you've already made the choice I hoped you. Never have to, I'm sorry, I left you more than land, I left you responsibility. Level 3 was designed to be untraceable even by the Bureau. If you open it, you accept guardianship of what's inside. I only ask one thing, don't do it out of curiosity. Do it because your gut tells you it's the right time. I sat with that letter all night. Not reading. Feeling. There was weight in those words, the kind that doesn't just sit on your shoulders but digs into your soul. My grandfather hadn't just trusted me with a ranch. He'd trusted me with a choice. And choices have consequences. I unlocked Level 3 at 6:47 the next morning. No cameras, no witnesses. Just Emma beside me, not as a lawyer, but as the one person who had stood beside me through all of it. The air was colder in that hallway, stiller, thicker. The door creaked open, revealing a room that didn't look like the others. No metal shelves, no plastic bins. Just one long wooden table in the center. And a single briefcase resting on it. Old, worn. Same kind of leather my grandfather used for his fieldwork. Beside it, a handwritten inventory list. No title, just this at the top. Only if it must survive. I opened the case slowly. Inside, 3 items. A series of handwritten notes and maps, not just of Morrison Ranch, but of other properties across the U.S. A set of USB drives, labeled with federal case numbers, many of which didn't appear in any searchable database. And finally, a small velvet-lined box containing a single metal cylinder. At first, it looked unremarkable. But Emma knew immediately. That's a data vault, she whispered. Military grade. These things can survive fire, water, electromagnetic pulses. Whatever, in there, someone wanted to make sure it couldn't be destroyed. There was also a letter. Not to me. To Agent Chen. We called her. When she arrived and read the letter, her hands shook for the first time. She didn't speak for a full minute. just stared at the vault. Then she looked at me. Your grandfather was part of a shadow operations directive that never made it to official record. He helped document criminal infrastructure that went beyond what the Bureau could prosecute. Why didn't he tell anyone? I asked. He did, she said. He told you. That's when she opened the vault. And what came out wasn't just case files. It was proof of names, high-level political figures, bank executives, real estate developers, even foreign intelligence agents, all connected through a single laundering pipeline that had used residential communities like Highland Estates to hide billions. Not millions. Billions. Not just in the US, but Canada, Brazil, Germany, Singapore. And the worst part, some of those names were in government now. Active, influential, shielded. This isn't a takedown, Agent Chen said. This is a war file. And that's when I finally understood what my grandfather meant by final contingency. Because if the Bureau was ever compromised, if the system ever protected the criminals instead of punishing them, this vault would give someone outside the system a way to fight back. That someone was me. I didn't feel worthy of it. Not for a second. I was just a guy who fed chickens and wrote software from a home office. I wasn't trained for this. I didn't wear a badge. But I understood something now that I hadn't before. The badge doesn't make the protector. The choice does. We locked the vault again, secured it inside the ranch's deepest chamber. And this time, added our own protections. Agent Chen launched a sub-task force built off the intelligence. Emma worked with federal prosecutors to create layered legal frameworks that would allow action without political interference. But the core data, the names, they stayed here. In Morrison Ranch, where no one could alter, delete, or bury them. Because legacy doesn't just mean inheriting land. It means inheriting truth and guarding it. The ranch changed again after that. It became more than a teaching center. It became a hub, a safe node for federal integrity work, a cross-checking site for communities under suspicion of infiltration, a place where survivors, whistleblowers, and victims could be heard without fear. We partnered with watchdog groups, launched a YouTube channel focused on real estate fraud awareness, and built a library of training materials to help small communities identify the early signs of manipulation. And every week we saw the impact. People wrote in, called, visited. Some just wanted to say thank you. Others needed help. Some wanted to confess, to come clean about deals they'd been offered, or roles they'd played in systems they didn't fully understand. And none of that would have happened if I'd sold the ranch. If I'd let Melissa buy me out. If I'd let fear write the ending. But now, the story was writing itself into something much larger. And deeper still, something personal was growing too. Emma and I had stopped pretending we were just working together. It wasn't sudden, it wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, solid, real. We cooked dinner more nights than not, watched documentaries on cases similar to ours, argued over legal theory, laughed over bad farm repairs, walked the property together every Sunday morning, coffee in hand, boots on grass, silence between us that felt like home. We didn't need to define it. We were building it. And as I watched her create a clinic that empowered families who had been silenced, and as she watched me turn a chicken farm into a federal integrity site, we both saw something neither of us expected to find again. Purpose. And not just any purpose. Shared purpose. The legacy of Morrison Ranch no longer lived in just one man's memory. It lived in every child, who visited the new underground museum and left with a fraud spotter badge. It lived in every homeowner who read our newsletter and avoided signing a shady deed. It lived in every whistleblower who sent us a coded message and found a safe place to speak. And it lived in me. Because legacy isn't about inheritance. It's about what you do when you're the one left standing, and the whole world is watching to see whether you run or rise. My grandfather never ran. And now neither would I. Just when you think the nightmare is over, something shifts. Not loud, not obvious. A detail, a whisper, a pause in someone's answer. And that's when you realize the real storm was never outside. It was coming from above. I'd started to feel something close to peace. For the first time in months, the ranch felt still again. No sirens, no SUVs, no strangers with clipboards and empty smiles. Just morning mist across the fields, the soft sound of chickens rustling awake, and Emma's voice in the kitchen, humming some old Spanish melody while she brewed coffee. But peace, I've learned, doesn't last long when your land is built on secrets. And this secret would test everything we'd rebuilt. It started with a file. Agent Chen handed it to me one afternoon, her expression unreadable, the air unusually tense. Another community came forward, she said. South Carolina, a place called River Hollow. My heart dropped. I already knew what that name meant. River Hollow had come up once before, buried in my grandfather's notes. He circled it twice and written just one word beneath it. Compromised. Chen flipped the file open. Same signs, sudden HOA power shifts, rapid real estate transactions, anonymous shell companies, but this time, one of the shell corporations ties directly to a name we didn't expect. She turned the page. And there it was. C. Hensley, Assistant Director, FBI. My stomach twisted. Chen kept talking, her voice low but sharp, like a blade she hated having to use. We believe Hensley's been leaking information. For years, Melissa Grant didn't just build Highland Estates on her own. She had help from someone on the inside, someone who fed her intelligence about site locations, witness movements, and upcoming investigations. Emma sat down hard on the porch step. Her voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper. She knew where to look, because someone was pointing the flashlight for her. I nodded slowly, mind racing. She knew the surveillance blind spots, the backdoors, the names of people on clearance lists that weren't public. This wasn't just intuition, it was logistics. And now, finally, we had a name. But with that name came danger. Because exposing a criminal is hard. Exposing someone who's built walls of legality around themselves, someone who wears the same badge as the people trying to stop them, that's a whole different war. You're saying Melissa was working with the FBI? I asked. No, Chen said. I'm saying someone in the bureau was working with her. She paused. And they might still be. For a long time, none of us spoke. Because some truths don't just change the game. They shatter the board entirely. The next move wasn't tactical, it was emotional. Because if someone that high up was compromised, then our victory over Melissa wasn't just temporary. It was exposed. And if they knew what Morrison Ranch was, if they knew what had been hidden here, then it wasn't just about stopping future threats anymore. It was about protecting the past. Agent Chen made the call. The vault would be moved. But not to Washington, not to Quantico. It would be duplicated and split across 3 independent locations, including one off-grid federal facility in Montana, one in upstate New York, and one encrypted digital node hosted by a secured third-party server in Iceland. The original stays with you, she said. Hensley's people can't search what they can't legally access, and Morrison Ranch is still considered a privately owned civilian property. I didn't ask if it was risky. I already knew it was. But risk is only dangerous if you're unprepared. And after what we'd been through, we were ready for anything. Or so we thought. The breach came at 3:13 a.m. A drone, silent, small, flying low through the trees. It wasn't FBI issue. No standard serial, no traceable signal. But it had one job. Scan for heat signatures. It hovered near the garage for 7 minutes. Then vanished. We only caught it because Maria's son, who had taken an interest in perimeter security, had mounted a new sensor array near the silo. The alert hit my phone at 3:14. Emma and I were on our feet in seconds. Chen arrived 20 minutes later with a full federal response team, but the damage had already been done. They know it's still here, she said grimly. I looked at her. Then we make them think it is. Operation Mirror Field. That's what we called it. Over the next 2 weeks, we constructed 4 decoy bunkers around the property. Using specs pulled from my grandfather's original blueprints, we created identical entrances, same locks, same markings, same materials. We even rotated surveillance signals so the real vault looked dormant while one of the fakes pulsed with false activity. The vault itself, we re-encased it, hardened the fail-safe triggers, installed manual fire suppression and EMP shielding, and then we added something new. Biometric authorization. No one, not even Emma or Chen, could access the full contents of the data without me. Because if this was going to be war, I needed to carry the weapon myself. And that's when I made a decision. I wasn't just going to protect what was here. I was going to finish what my grandfather started. We went public. Not with names, not with evidence. With the story. A documentary team that had been following our rebuild released a 12-part YouTube series titled The Ranch That Fought Back. And it exploded. 500,000 views in the first week. 2 million the next. Then headlines. National news outlets picked it up. Interviews followed. But what mattered more than the media attention was what came next. Other ranchers, other homeowners, other towns. People who said, "We've seen something like this too. We thought we were crazy. We didn't know what to do." And suddenly, Morrison Ranch wasn't just a symbol. It was a beacon. Chen worked with new task forces to field incoming tips. Emma's legal clinic grew 3 times in size. She hired 2 paralegals and opened a hotline for property fraud victims. Maria started a mentorship program for teens interested in law enforcement, coding, or agriculture, combining all the skills we'd used to defend our home. And I built a new system. A digital watchdog, a program that used machine learning to flag suspicious HOA behavior across public databases. We called it Project Line Fence. And it worked. Within 3 months, Line Fence had flagged 38 developments nationwide, showing early signs of shell infiltration. The system we fought was rebuilding itself. But now so were we. Then came the warning. A note slipped into the mailbox, no return address, handwritten, no fingerprints. Just 6 words. You're not ready for what's next. I showed it to Chen. She didn't flinch. Good, she said, that means we're getting close. And I realized something in that moment. Fear doesn't mean you're in danger. It means you're on the edge of something real. Melissa had been the blade. But someone else had held the handle. And whoever that was. They were watching now. But so were we. Truth is only dangerous when someone tries to bury it. And when they do, it doesn't just become a secret. It becomes a weapon. They didn't try to kill me. They tried to silence me. It happened on a Wednesday. Normal weather, clear skies, calm routines. Emma was at the clinic, working with a family that had just uncovered forged HOA documents on their land title. I was on the back half of the ranch, checking sensor logs, when my phone buzzed. Blocked number. Again. I didn't answer the first 2 calls. But the third time, something told me to pick up. The voice on the other end wasn't threatening. It was calm, cultured, familiar. Mr. Morrison, the man said, I strongly advise you to stop your work with Agent Chen. I didn't respond. We know about the duplicates, the vaults, the new task force, line fence, you're moving faster than expected, that's inconvenient. Still, I stayed silent. There are larger considerations at play, things your grandfather understood. That's why he built the vault, not to expose but to contain. And then, like he was offering a favor. We can make this easier, buy the land, wipe the debt, you and Miss Rodriguez walk away clean, no press, no pressure. I laughed. You don't know anything about me. He chuckled softly. I know everything about you. Then he hung up. 5 minutes later, the entire ranch's power grid went down. Not a fuse. Not a storm. A cyber attack. Backup protocols kicked in immediately, solar, battery, manual lockdown. The data vault stayed secure. The comm station in the old chicken coop fired up automatically. But this wasn't about shutting us down. It was a message. Agent Chen arrived within the hour, her face hard. They're escalating, she said. You just got a call from someone inside the bureau. That's not speculation anymore. That's confirmation. She handed me a sealed folder. This came through classified channels. I wasn't supposed to see it. Inside were internal memos, redacted names, references to unauthorized duplication of sealed intelligence, mentions of Morrison Ranch as a rogue data node. One line stood out. Operation Black Picket authorized pending internal clearance. What is Black Picket? I asked. Chen didn't answer at first. Then she looked me in the eyes. It's a cleanup directive. It means, if a federal asset becomes uncontrollable, it gets neutralized. I stood there, completely still. The air felt heavier, thicker, hot. They're calling you an internal threat, she said, and if the wrong people get their way, they'll come for the vault. She didn't say the rest. They'll come for you. That night, I didn't sleep. Neither did Emma. We sat at the kitchen table until sunrise, not talking strategy or protocol but legacy. What happens if we expose everything? I asked. Emma stared out the window. They'll deny it, say the files are fake, call us conspiracy theorists. They'll use our own story to discredit us. Even if Chen vouches for it. Emma nodded. She might not be enough, she's still inside the system, and the system protects itself. I thought about what was in that vault. Names, connections, shell companies, banking routes, election interference data, judges, contractors, 2 sitting senators. Everything we'd uncovered, everything my grandfather had buried, could bring down entire governments. But what would that collapse take with it? Would people lose faith? Would it create chaos? Or would it finally wake them up? Emma reached across the table and took my hand. Whatever you decide, I'll back you, but just remember this. She paused. There's a difference between telling the truth and delivering it to people who are ready to hear it. If you do this, you can't take it back. And that's when I knew. This wasn't just my story anymore. It was everyone's. 3 days later, the final warning arrived. A black envelope slid under our front door during the night. No name, just a single phrase printed in block type on a white card inside. You open it, you own it. Emma and I stood over the kitchen counter, staring at the card. Neither of us touched it. Chen came over that afternoon. She'd been followed twice that week. Her direct line had gone dark. Someone had flagged her badge number for suspension, no cause listed. They're moving faster than we thought, she said. You've got a narrow window left. I looked at her. Then help me blow it open. She nodded, no hesitation. You sure? I nodded back. I'm done protecting a world that protects people like them. We initiated Protocol Echo that night. A full public disclosure strategy built around 3 contingencies. A deep dive media release through 3 independent international outlets. A backup launch via Line Fence's YouTube channel, where over 3 million subscribers were already following our story. A time-locked distribution to whistleblower networks in case of interception. The data would go wide. Every name, every document, every truth. Unless I manually stopped it in 72 hours. It wasn't just a release. It was a choice. And I had 3 days to make it. On the second day, someone tried to burn down the ranch. Not a wildfire, not an accident. An arsonist. They lit the far barn, the old one that had held antique tools and nothing of value. But they meant for the flames to spread. What they didn't count on was the community. Maria's son saw the smoke first. Within 5 minutes, neighbors were on site with hoses, buckets, even fire blankets. Dorothy Walsh stood in the driveway directing traffic like she was born for it. And Emma. She walked straight toward the flames with nothing but a shovel, hacking at brush to slow the spread until the fire truck arrived. That fire never reached the house. It never touched the vault. But it did something else. It turned my fear into fury. On the 3rd night, I stood in the same garage my grandfather had built. The one where this all started. Where Margaret first glanced with that hungry look, the look that said she knew there was more to this place than fences and feed. The vault was open. The countdown ticking. And in front of me, the final prompt. Proceed with full release. I hovered over the button. 1 click. 1 moment. 1 choice. Behind me, Emma stood silent. No pressure, just presence. That's when I heard my grandfather's voice again, not out loud, not in memory. But in that one sentence he'd written. If you open it, be prepared to carry it. I closed my eyes. Took a breath. Then I clicked yes. The world didn't explode. But it definitely shook. The first leak hit international news within an hour. By sunrise, 3 major federal buildings were in emergency lockdown. 2 officials resigned, 1 disappeared. And Morrison Ranch. It became the eye of a truthquake. We didn't hide. We went live. Emma and I sat in front of a single camera, no script, no edits, and told the entire story from the beginning. Margaret. The Hunters. The FBI safe house. Melissa Grant. Agent Chen. The vault. The choice. No spin, no conspiracy tone. Just facts. And pain. And responsibility. Millions watched. Tens of millions shared. And when the smoke cleared, we weren't alone anymore. But the storm isn't over. Part of me knows it never will be. Because when you fight power this deep, this protected, the consequences ripple for years. Agent Chen now leads an independent oversight unit. No badge, no salary, just a mission. David Rodriguez transferred into civilian intelligence. He runs off-grid analysis for justice groups across the globe. Emma and I still live here, still love here. She proposed to me 6 months after the release. Said she didn't want a wedding with flowers. She wanted one with roots. So we got married under the same oak tree where my grandfather used to sharpen his tools, with neighbors as witnesses and chickens wandering through the aisle. And the vault. It's still here. Empty now. But never forgotten. Because sometimes, justice doesn't look like a courtroom. Sometimes, it looks like a ranch that refused to be bought. And a man who finally understood what his grandfather had always tried to teach him. The only legacy that matters is the one you choose to carry. Justice doesn't always arrive with sirens. Sometimes it walks in on its own, quiet, patient, inevitable. The day Melissa Grant was sentenced, the courtroom was packed. Reporters, victims, prosecutors. And me. She didn't look like the woman who had once led armed hunters into my backyard. She didn't look like the queen of a money-laundering empire. She just looked small. She refused to speak when the judge asked if she had anything to say. Not a word. Not even when victims from 6 states stood and told the court how she'd ruined their communities, manipulated their trust, erased their savings. When it was my turn, I didn't bring papers. I brought one photo. It was the ranch, in black and white, a shot from the 1930s, when my great-grandfather first rebuilt the barn after a tornado flattened the property. I held it up and said only this. You tried to erase my history, but you couldn't because you never understood it. The judge sentenced her to 45 years. She never looked back as they took her away. And I never looked for her again. Because her story was over. But ours was just beginning. The Morrison community didn't just survive the storm. It bloomed. The same neighborhood that once tried to push me out now had a waiting list of people trying to get in, not because of the houses, but because of the people. Dorothy Walsh's HOA board rewrote every rule from scratch. No more silence, no more surprise fines, no more meetings behind closed doors. Every change was voted on, every voice mattered. Maria Santos's garden program expanded. Her son graduated high school early with honors and started a nonprofit connecting rural teens with cybersecurity mentors, modeled after our own surveillance protocols. We called it RootNet. Even the sheriff's department started coming by more often, not for enforcement but for community nights, picnics, safety workshops, connections. The ranch became a different kind of landmark. Not for what happened here, but for what we did afterward. The underground vault was transformed into a memorial exhibit, equal parts history, evidence, and warning. We didn't sensationalize anything. We told the story plainly, through dates, records, interviews, and personal artifacts. No conspiracy, no theatrics, just hard truth and harder resilience. People came from across the country to walk those halls. Some came because they were curious. Some came because they were afraid. And some came because they were ready to fight back in their own neighborhoods. That's why we built the training center. Emma named it Legacy 1. It was her idea to expand the legal clinic into a full-scale support network for victims of HOA abuse, land fraud, and community corruption. With Chen's help, we partnered with federal and state agencies to offer rapid response teams in any state where signs of infiltration emerged. We weren't just recovering anymore. We were preventing. And that was the real victory. Not the arrests, not the headlines. The prevention. The lives never ruined. The homes never lost. The families never threatened. Because once you shine a light on darkness, it can never hide the same way again. A few months later, I found something I wasn't looking for. It was a letter, buried in the lining of my grandfather's old coat, the one he always wore when checking fences after storms. It wasn't addressed to me. It was addressed to the future keeper. Inside was a single page, his handwriting, clean, firm, unshaken. If this ranch ever faces fire again, and you are the one holding the gate, remember this. You don't fight for land. You fight for the people who stand on it. You don't protect secrets. You protect truth, because truth becomes the land when it's carried long enough. You won't always know what to do. But if you love this place, and the people who believe in it, you'll choose right. Because that's what Morrison men do. And someday, what Morrison families will do. I folded the letter, placed it in the vault not as evidence, as a cornerstone. Emma and I never left the ranch. We talked about it once, after the release, when the network started offering book deals, speaking tour, TV interviews. But we always came back to the same answer. This land doesn't just have a story, she said. It has a pulse, and we're part of it now. So we stayed. And we raised our first daughter here. We named her Alina Grace Morrison, after Emma's grandmother and my mother. She took her first steps in the exact same dirt, where my grandfather once taught me how to drive fence posts with a sledgehammer too big for my arms. She said her first word beside the chicken coop. She planted her first carrot in the same soil Melissa Grant once tried to steal. And someday, when she's old enough, I'll take her down to the vault. Not to show her what we fought, but to show her what we protected. There are days I still walk the perimeter, not because I expect danger, but because it reminds me. Reminds me that safety isn't permanent. It's something you tend, like crops, like animals, like relationships. Neglect it and it dies. Care for it and it feeds generations. Sometimes I stop by the oak tree where we got married. Other times I end up back in the garage, where all this began. And every time I walk those paths, I say the same silent thing. We're still here. Because that's the message that matters most. We're still here. We didn't break. We didn't run. We didn't sell. We didn't stay silent. We stood. And when the wolves came dressed as neighbors, we didn't bow. If you're watching this, and you've ever been afraid of someone taking what's yours, know this. You are not alone. If someone's pushing you off your land, trying to silence your voice, or convince you that their power means your silence, push back. Because sometimes, the biggest movements don't start in city halls or newsrooms. Sometimes they start on a dirt road, on a ranch, with a fence that refuses to fall. And a voice that finally says, no more. They say legacies are passed down like heirlooms. But I don't believe that anymore. I believe legacies are chosen. In hard moments, quiet ones. In the second you stand your ground. In the breath before you say enough. In the heartbeat after someone tries to take your story away. I didn't choose this fight. But I chose how it ended. And when the dust cleared, when the cameras were gone, and the fences were rebuilt, I realized something. My grandfather didn't leave me a ranch. He left me a future. And I protected it. With every nail, every password, every truth. Now it's your turn. Because someone's watching your land, your home, your name. And they're hoping you'll stay silent. Don't. Speak, stand, build. And when they come, let them find you already standing. Every HOA has a story on HOA headaches. You'll hear the ones they tried to bury. Subscribe today.